Hello, my name is Colby Mazzarella. Welcome to Life Matters, a BNN show sponsored by Massachusetts Citizens for Life. MCFL is a nonprofit organization which has defended life for 31 years. I'd like to read our mission statement. Can we show that on the screen? In recognition of the fact that each human life is a continuum from conception to natural death, the mission of Massachusetts Citizens for Life is to promote respect for human life and to defend the right to life of all human beings, born and unborn. We will influence public policy at the local, state, and national levels through comprehensive educational, legislative, political, and charitable activities. Today's show is one of our educational activities, an ongoing effort to show people who defend the vulnerable, who defend all human life, born or unborn, healthy or unhealthy, dependent or independent. Every week we interview a guest who speaks up for the vulnerable, and I think that's the definition of a hero. Today's guest is with us by phone today, Scott Klusendorf. Today he's calling us from Bryan College in Tennessee. He speaks at colleges, he speaks at churches, and his talks reach 40,000 students or adults every year. Scott, welcome to Life Matters. Okay, Scott, do we have you on the line here?
Colby, how are you?
How are you? I've given the audience a little mention of your activities, and today you're at Bryan College. What are you doing there today, for example?
Well, I'm at Bryan College with a group called Summit Ministries. They are a group that trains young Christians how to defend a biblical worldview in the secular marketplace of ideas. And we're here with a couple hundred of those students, training them to be good apologists for the Christian faith.
So how do they react to your pro-life message?
Overwhelmingly positive. Students today are hungry for good, real-life answers to the tough questions. And this idea that young people can't handle good, solid arguments in defense of a pro-life worldview is simply false. They eat it up. They love it.
So you're not finding young people who are alienated and uncaring about an unborn person, for example?
There are people who are like that, but not these students here. These students have been taught, first of all, that truth is real and knowable. Truth is not just a preference like your favorite flavor of ice cream. Truth is something that corresponds to reality. And when they bring that worldview to their real-life situations, it's very easy for them to make decisions that are based on moral clarity rather than on fuzzy thinking.
Well, to get to some of the reality, I've brought pictures from your website, which were development of an unborn person, and I wondered if you get some comments. I have a picture I'm going to put on the screen, which is a 7-week unborn baby, and I want you to explain maybe for our audience what. It isn't a fully developed person. What do we have a right to do to this 7-week-old undeveloped, semi-developed person?
Well, you're absolutely right. A 7-week-old fetus does not look the same way you and I look. The question is, does our value as a human being depend on what we look like or what we are? It wasn't that long ago, a century and a half ago or so, that many people thought African Americans didn't look like white people, therefore they didn't qualify as being fully human. But we all know how vacuous that reasoning was. The truth of the matter is that there's only 4 differences between that embryo we once were, that picture you're looking at now, and the adults we are today. We were, at the time, smaller. We are now more developed. We are now more independent than we once were, and right now we are, of course, able to think more abstractly than we were back then. But none of those things are relevant differences that would allow us to say we had no value then, but we do now.
Well, this picture is a 7-week-old fetus. Now, when do most abortions take place?
Most abortions take place between week 7 and week 12. 90% take place in that time frame. And of course, the typical argument from some people is, well, hey, you know, this thing that's being aborted is not even developed yet. It's not even self-aware. But since when does self-awareness give us value? When we're sleeping at night, we're not self-aware, but it doesn't follow we forfeit our right to life.
Okay, I put an 8-week-old picture on the screen, and now you can see that there's arms, legs, head, eyes. You see the whole body there. a little
Right.
bit different proportion. Some people say, well, that doesn't look human.
Yeah, that's true. It doesn't look human when compared to an adult, but it does look exactly like an 8-week fetus should look like at that stage of development. And again, I want to point out that what we look like is not what gives us value. It's the kind of thing we are that gives us value. There are children that are born without arms and legs, and they don't look like us. But no one listening to us today is going to assume they have no value simply because their appearance is different than our own.
Okay, so we have, you're explaining to students who are already pro-life how to present their case, and what kind of obstacles do they have to overcome?
There's two in particular. The first is that many people today assume that truth is like ice cream. They assume that when it comes to morals and ethics, all we have are personal preferences. We can't argue from a position of being right or wrong. And I don't hold that view at all. There's many things we know to be true that we can say, look, just because they're not scientifically proven doesn't mean we can't know them to be true. Here's an example. It's wrong to torture toddlers for fun. You can't prove that scientifically, but everyone listening to me right now knows that it's wrong to torture toddlers for fun. And if they don't know that, they don't need an argument. They need a counselor. The reality is there are truths that can be known, and we can argue for those truths, but today many people are just under the assumption they don't really exist. The second problem we have is many people think that humans are valuable only for what they can do functionally, not for the kind of thing they are intrinsically. And those two obstacles, the truth question and the human value question, are at the heart of the debates we're having right now as a nation over cloning, embryonic stem cell research, and abortion.
Well, Massachusetts would like to be the stem cell capital of the world, and we get votes in our legislature about how much research we're going to allow on stem cells. And cloning too. What kind of guidelines should we be looking at?
Well, I think we need to make it clear that pro-lifers are not opposed to stem cell research. We're opposed to one particular kind of stem cell research that involves creating a human embryo for the sole purpose of destroying it for its stem cells. That kind of research is immoral. In fact, if you went to most of the public and said, do you think your tax dollars should be used to create a human embryo and then specifically destroy it later so we can use its body parts for medical research, most people would say, yuck, no way, you can't do that. But when you say, are you opposed to stem cell research and finding cures, people say, no, we're not opposed to that. We support that. The good news is we don't have to take the lives of nascent human beings in order to find cures for disease. The truth is adult stem cells are currently treating 72 known diseases, while embryonic stem cells are currently treating none.
So adult stem cells, where do they come from?
They come from your own body. For example, we could take a stem cell from your arm, a bone marrow stem cell, implant it in your brain, and it becomes a nerve cell. These cells are far more flexible than originally thought, and because we can control them, which is something we can't do with embryonic stem cells, they are much safer to use, and so far it's being proven more effective.
So they're safer, adult stem cells are safer, and they're more successful. You said 72 diseases are being cured?
72 known diseases are currently being engaged with adult stem cell treatments. Embryonic stem cell treatments are not even in clinical trials, and there's a reason for it. They have a tendency to form tumors. We've got to figure out how to control what they'll do. And then we have to deal with the fact that there's tissue and cell rejection issues. So there's some big obstacles that are going to make it difficult to bring embryonic stem cells into the medical marketplace anytime soon.
So it's not, it's too dangerous to try out on humans right now. What about when they've tried on animals? You said they've had tumors. What about cloning? Was that healthy for animals?
It has not been healthy for animals. The first cloned sheep, Dolly, died of abnormalities at a time that she shouldn't have died. She died prematurely. And so far, the research is indicating that this is not physically healthy for living subjects. But I think we need to be clear that there's moral problems as well. When you create an embryo for the express purpose of cloning it for medical research, meaning creating it so it can be destroyed to benefit someone else, that's morally wrong. If I have a bad eye and you have a good eye, Colby, I don't have a right to take your good eye to make my bad eye feel better. And the same principle would apply here.
So if stem cell research was perfected and it was curing people from embryos, it would still be killing the embryo in order to cure the other person.
Yes, and I want to make it clear, I'm not making the claim embryonic stem cells will never prove beneficial. Perhaps they will. Maybe they will find a way to overcome these obstacles we mentioned. At the moment, it doesn't look very likely, but it could happen. And then we would still have to say, look, it's not right to take the life of one human being to benefit another human being.
Now, Scott, you're explaining things like this to students today, and you go, I understand that your work reaches 40,000 students a year, or people a year. How do you reach so many people?
Well, two ways. We reach about 40,000 people a year in direct face-to-face presentations. That means where I'm speaking at schools, colleges. I do a lot of speaking at secular universities in debate formats. I do a lot of speaking at Christian colleges and high schools for assemblies, both Catholic and Protestant. In addition, we reach a couple million people each year through media. So if you combine those things together, we're doing pretty well.
What kinds of media do you use?
Mostly radio. Radio seems to be the biggest thing that I do, but I do some television as well, but radio tends to be the predominant media culture I use.
Now, you have a website. How does that work? How do you reach people, and what do they do on your website?
At our website, we have got a couple of things that are drawing people. Currently, we get about 1,000 visitors a day to our image section, where we have a videotape that graphically depicts what abortion is. And that alone is getting about 1,000 people a day to it. It's a short videotape. It actually is in DVD format that we've put on the web. It is about 2.5 minutes long, and that's getting a tremendous amount of traffic. But in addition to that, we have articles that give people the tools of thought they need to defend the pro-life point of view in the marketplace of ideas. And one of the neat, handy little things people can get there is a little article I've written called How to Defend Your Pro-Life View in 5 Minutes or Less. What if you've only got 5 minutes to make a case for the pro-life view with a friend over the backyard fence or a coworker at the water cooler? That article will give you the tools you need to do that.
So that article's on prolifetraining.com.
Prolifetraining.com, and just click on the link that says articles.
Now, you also have videotapes. It isn't just a regular videotape, it's interactive. How does that work?
What we have is we have a video series called Making Abortion Unthinkable that my co-author, Greg Kokel, and I did, that in a 5-hour format will equip people to make a case for the pro-life view wherever they are. And it teaches you how to overcome things like people saying, you shouldn't force your morality on me, or who are you to judge? These are very common objections we get to the pro-life view. And of course, as soon as someone says you shouldn't force your view on me, they've just forced their own view on you. So it's sort of a self-refuting claim. But we give people the tools of thought they need to make a case for the pro-life view in a secular marketplace of ideas. It's not enough for pro-lifers to say the Bible's against abortion, therefore you should be too. We've got to do better than that. We have to give people good, solid scientific and philosophic reasons for the pro-life view.
Now, I have a clip from your video, and you're explaining about using the graphic abortion pictures. We're not going to show the graphic pictures today and have kids see them on TV, but they are available at your website, prolifetraining.com, if someone wants to know the facts about abortion. What do you say about the use of those pictures? Do you think you're manipulating people to show the actual abortion, the actual results of the abortion?
No, not at all. We only would be manipulating if the pictures weren't true, or if we were using pictures in place of good arguments, and we're not doing either of those things. We're using the pictures as truthful representations of what abortion is, and we're using them as adjuncts to arguments, not in place of good arguments. No one complains when a professor who lectures against the Holocaust shows pictures of the victims that were in the death camps. When someone speaks, for example, on the Vietnam War, they most often will use pictures of children running naked from a village that's just been napalmed. or perhaps a South Vietnamese police chief executing a Viet Cong insurgent right in the streets of Saigon. Nobody thinks those pictures are inappropriate, but yet when it comes to abortion, people say, hands off, you're not allowed to show it for what it is. I think feminist Naomi Wolf, who is herself an abortion choice advocate, puts it real well. She says, look, if these pictures are true, and she argues they are, she says we shouldn't try to censor these pictures because we don't like them. That's not right. Feminism, at its best, is what's true. And if the pictures are true, and again she argues they mostly are, then we should admit them as evidence. And I agree with her position.
So she's a pro-choice person,
yeah.
But you agree that you should face the truth.
That's right.
Well, we're going to have a clip from your video explaining how to reach people talking about graphic pictures. We're going to stop it before it comes to the actual pictures, and that's up to you, the audience, if they want to go on, find that online. Can we have that video clip now?
Thanks, Greg. Pro-life advocates tend to make one of two mistakes with graphic visual aids. First, they use them poorly, which is to say they spring them on an unsuspecting audience with absolutely no warning and no preparation, or they don't use them at all. There's a third alternative, and that's to use them wisely. First, warn listeners that the video contains graphic abortion pictures. Then, advise them to look away or leave the room if they don't want to watch. Tell them that the purpose is not to condemn anyone, but to clarify the moral confusion. And finally, when talking to a Christian audience, mention that our Lord is eager to forgive the sin of abortion and that this may be a good opportunity for confession and repentance. Now I want to prepare you for the video Harder Truth. This is a videotape that I have used effectively throughout the United States and Canada to restore meaning to the word abortion. Please be aware the pictures are graphic, gruesome, very difficult to watch, but absolutely essential, because they restore meaning to the word abortion in a way no words ever can. Let me say, however, that if you're here today watching this and you've had an experience with an abortion, this is not designed to make you feel bad. Our Lord is eager to forgive the sin of abortion, and He'll do it if you request it. These pictures are being shown because we want to restore meaning to the word abortion with a culture that thinks the word abortion is meaningless. The pictures tell a very different story. And now, here's Harder Truth.
Okay, we stopped it before we got to the Harder Truth, which is the name of the video you were discussing. Now, I understand people will say, I don't want to see what an abortion does to an unborn child. Do you find, what do they say when they decide to see it? Then what do they say afterwards?
You know, it's funny. I've had people who've had abortions view that clip and thank me for showing it afterward because they are happy that other people are seeing it so that they don't make the same mistake that they made in choosing abortion. The other thing is most people say, wow, we had no idea this is what we were talking about. They'd been misled, told that it was no big deal. And what's interesting about the video clip that's on our website that you invited people to look at prolifetraining.com is that the videotape, with the exception of the final scene, is all late first trimester abortion footage, and most abortions take place in the first trimester. So it accurately represents when most of the abortions are happening. It's not a distortion of the reality. It's an exact representation of what is going on.
Okay, what do people say? They say that they don't want to see the picture, that it's making it harder on the woman. You can understand it would be very upsetting. Someone's thinking about having an abortion, and then they see a picture of a dead fetus that has been injured by the abortion and killed. So that's upsetting. Now people say, well, you shouldn't upset the woman. It's hard enough. She's in a hard situation, and you're just making it harder on her.
Well, I would say two things. First thing I'd say is it's not always wrong to upset people. Look, it's never fun to admit that we did something that wasn't right. That's always going to involve pain. And I think there can come in our culture today a sort of self-centeredness that says, because I have been wounded by a particular choice that I made, no one else should have to view the consequences of that choice. And I think that's not fair. The second thing I would say is that often the most important step in finding healing is to come face to face with what we did that was wrong, stop denying the truth, admit we made a mistake, and then ask for forgiveness, and that's when we start to find reconciliation and healing.
So there is healing. How do people go through a process? How do they start healing after being involved in an abortion personally?
There's two levels of this. For a non-Christian person who is not coming from a Christian worldview, I think you start with an acknowledgement of what was done, that it offends a moral standard, and that that moral standard should not have been violated by taking the life of the defenseless child. And then the excuses stop. We stop saying, well, I had to do this. Instead, we say, I made a decision, I now regret it, I wish I'd made a better one, and I'm going to take steps to move on with my life. In a Christian environment, I think it's very important for people to realize that all of us by nature deserve God's wrath. We have sinned against a holy God, and we deserve to be punished for that. But thankfully, the good news of the Christian gospel is that Jesus Christ took the penalty for our sins so we wouldn't have to, which means people who have sinned on the issue of abortion, like people who have sinned on the issue of stealing, cheating on their spouses, cheating on their tests, or gossiping, or whatever, can find healing and forgiveness through the power of Jesus Christ.
Now, I've seen people at pro-life marches or pro-choice marches with signs that say, I regret my abortion.
Yeah, those are pro-life marches. Yeah, correct.
Or else they would be protesting a pro-choice march and by saying, I regret my abortion. Either way, they would be coming out in public saying, I did have an abortion and I regret it. Is that, that must be very difficult for them. Then how does that help their progress through healing?
Well, if you were to talk to many of those women, they would tell you that they are on a very healthy path of healing, that has been helpful for them to come out and say, I did this, I regret it, I wish I'd gone a different way, and I'm not going to deny the truth anymore. I'm going to quit playing word games, I'm going to stop making excuses, I'm going to own it, and I'm going to move forward. And I admire those women for doing that. On a tactical note, I might add, though, that I think the pro-life movement should make its primary message the humanity of the unborn and the inhumanity of abortion, rather than how abortion impacts individual women. We certainly want to care for those women who have been wounded by abortion, but the primary wrongness of elective abortion has to do with the fact it takes the life of a defenseless human being, not so much that it happens to make women who've had abortions feel bad.
So it's a little bit like what you said about embryonic stem cell research. It has problems, it isn't working right, but in addition, even if it worked successfully, it would still be wrong. So even if an abortion didn't make the woman regret it and suffer physically and mentally, it would still be wrong because why?
Precisely the right framing there. Because it takes the life of a defenseless human being without justification. Pro-lifers don't argue that it's always wrong to take human life. We argue that it's wrong to take human life without justification. And we believe that elective abortion, meaning abortions performed for socioeconomic reasons, are done wrongly. They're not something that can be morally justified. And that's our key argument.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the shot of the 8-week-old preborn baby. This is the most abortions occur at this rate or even more developed. So if we can get that shot again, this is an 8-week unborn child. He's only been developing 8 weeks inside his mother or her mother. Now, you said abortion is wrong because of the humanity of this child. How can we tell if someone says, I don't know, is this really a human being?
Well, first of all, pictures aren't going to tell us whether or not something is a human being. We have to know what its parents are. Human parents produce human offspring. We refer to that as biogenesis, just like dogs produce dogs and cats produce cats. When people say that the unborn are not yet human, my first question is, how can two human parents create offspring that is not human but later becomes human? That's going to be difficult to explain biologically. So I think what we want to look at is, what kind of thing is the unborn? Well, let's start with what kind of things were its parents. That's going to give us a good clue.
Okay, so Scott, we're going to be finishing up now, and I thank you very much for coming on this show.
You are welcome.
If anyone wants more information, where would they find it?
They can go to prolifetraining.com. That's the best way to get us, and I encourage everybody to go to prolifetraining.com and click on the link for that video. Again, prolifetraining.com, and click on the link for the abortion video. And then also download that article, How to Defend Your Pro-Life View in 5 minutes or less. It'll only take you a few minutes to read it, and it will give you helpful tips for making the case for life where you live, work, and worship.
Well, I said at the beginning of our show that all of our guests speak up for the vulnerable, and that's really the definition of a hero. I think all of our audience can learn how to be a hero. If you look at prolifetraining.com or masscitizensforlife.org, then
that's another good group, yep.
Yes, you'll find it's masscitizensforlife.org. Both of those websites will give you some ideas how you could be a hero speaking up for the unborn too. Every one of you in my audience can speak up for vulnerable people, whether they're unborn or unhealthy or dependent. For some reason they're vulnerable. And our show is here to tell you that all life matters. Thank you for listening.